Good morning, class. This is Ishita ma'am, and I'm again back with the teaching learning video. I hope you're all doing well at home and staying all healthy and safe. So, class, today's lesson will be on story writing, which is part of your writing skills for class 9. Now, today's lesson, as I'm getting a lot of time here to explain things out, I agree that I'll be doing today's lesson in a very descriptive way. Not only that you'll know how to write the story or how interesting you can make your story, with all this, I'll also be talking about the different kinds of stories that we all get. Now, before I get into the detailing of the lesson, let me tell you your story writing for English in class 9, you'll get for the finals, it will be of 10 marks, okay? Where you need to frame a story all by yourself and the word limit will be 200 to 250 words. So, there you'll be getting kinds of stories and you need to frame that all in your own way, providing a title to it. But before that, let us just stepwise get into the details of it. As I told you before also, this is a detailing not only of the short story which you are writing for exams, but also you'll get to know about the different kinds of stories that we get to know on the basis of the format and the length. Okay, so let's just start. So, the writing of a story. So, how you're going to write it, what are the things you need to keep in mind, and how to frame, where you will form the story according to the content, according to the theme, everything will be there today. So, today's lesson will be a long one. Now, first, what you need to know is that what is story writing? I know many of you have the habit of reading storybooks. You get the storybooks from the school library also. But then many of you have the idea of writing stories as well. As for the wall magazines and all, I get stories from the students. So there you know how to do it, right? But then what should be the way where you can write it in a better way? Right? So that we are going to learn and read and understand today. So what is story writing? A story is basically a narrating of real or imaginary events involving real or imaginary people. A story needs to be presented in words necessarily. Okay, so we are not doing a picture story kind of a thing that you will get pictures in front of you and you need to frame it out from that. But here, the story is basically a narrating of real or imaginary events, that you are narrating your real events or things which you are making out of your own imagination. Okay, but it needs to be presented in words necessarily. Even images or moving pictures can narrate a story. It also sends a message across. This I have told you, that even the moving pictures which are there, everything has got a story in it. Even a chair, even a table, even a sun, if you want to, you can frame out stories out of that. It's just that you need to fix the point of which you are making out the story. A story writing is a work of fiction or imagination that is written in easy understandable grammatical structure with natural flow of speech. So it's of course a work of fiction or imagination. Fiction is the facts, okay? And it should be written in case of imagination also, and it should be written there with understandable grammatical structure with the natural flow of speech. It should not be that there is so discrepancy in the writing of the structure or in the writing of the speech. Everything should be with a spontaneous flow, with a natural flow, as if you're just saying out things. Okay, you need to understand that how crisp and how compact you can make all the incidents so that it becomes or comes out to be a good story. Now, on the basis of the format and its length, a story can be divided into. So, what are the different kinds of stories that you all get? This is basically on the according to the length, okay? Not always on any other things, but according to its length and format, we make it to different kinds, right? So, first, we have novel, you know, then novella or long story, like the adventures of Sherlock Holmes or those kinds of stories which has got long stories. Okay, those are called novella. And then you have short story, which you will which you will focus for your exam. And then you have your biography and autobiography. All these are different kinds of stories that we all write. Okay. Now, first is what a novel is. A novel, it's a fictitious prose narrative of book length, typically representing character and action with some degree of realism. So novel is that kind of prose narrative where you describe the story or where you go on with the narrative which is completely of a length of a book. That is a book that designs one particular story or tells about one particular story. It's not that the individual long stories or the individual adventures that you all get. It's one particular story that would cover up with the chapters. And of course, it must have a character and action with some degree of realism. Okay, I'm giving these details class just to enrich your interest in all these things as well. You are growing in class 9 and reading will be so very helpful to enrich your vocabulary, your speaking skills, your reading skills. The more you read books, you'll be able to, inculcate new words. You'll be able to understand and come out and bring out with your enriched vocabulary. So once you can write well, it's very necessary for you to know and to understand different kinds of things. So you must grow interest in reading out different storybooks. The more you read, the variety of your writing enriches as well. The next kind, okay, so these are the examples of novel. There are many. I could only fit in 3 here, which are my favorites as well. First is Khaled Hosseini, The Kite Runner, The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, and Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. So all these things are examples of novel, a complete book that depicts one particular story. Okay, so these are novels, the longest stories if we call them. The next is novella. A novella is a work of narrative prose fiction, longer than a short story but shorter than a novel. Okay, as I told you about the adventures of Tom Sawyer or Sherlock Holmes, there what you have one particular book having different chapters depicting different stories at times. So these are the longer stories. Okay, they are not as long as novel and not as short story. So in between what we get the longer stories, they are called novella. Okay, here we have Joseph Conrad, The Heart of Darkness, and Paul Ellen Fahey, Weep Not for the Past. These are some of the examples of your novella. The next is a common kind for you all, that's a biography. You know what a biography is? A biography is simply an account or detailed description about the life of a person. When somebody else is writing about someone here, we talk about biography. This is also a kind of story writing when some other author is writing about some other person or some other eminent person rather. Yes, it's of course can be that you are writing the biography of your father after a certain point of time. Of course it can be. So biographies are simply an account or detailed description about the life of a person. Every intricate details that you get, you can write about a person, and that we call a biography. Here I have brought up the biography of Swami Vivekananda and Einstein, his Life and Universe, written by Walter Isaacson. These are examples, famous examples of biography. Next you have autobiography. Autobiography, it's a self-written life story. Okay, it's just you are writing your own story. It's not that somebody else is writing. Biography is when someone else is writing the details about your story. And autobiography is when you yourself is writing about your life. Okay, here we have the two great people and their autobiographies in front of us. APJ Abdul Kalam's The Wings of Fire and Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. So these are the famous autobiographies as written by the different eminent people. Now here the short story, which will be your concern for class 9. Okay, we don't write, or 200 to 50 words will not be as enough for writing of a short story, but of course it can be a miniature of it. You just can have a start with these kinds of stories which you're writing for class 9, or which you'll write for class 10, and will make a habit of writing short stories in future also. So short story, it's a story with fully developed theme, but significantly shorter and less elaborate than a novel. Okay, of course, every short story has got a very intricate meaning in itself. It, of course, develops a great theme, but it is significantly shorter. Deliberately, it is made shorter, and it's not that elaborate than a novel. And for when I talk about short story, it's very important to remember the definition of short story as told by Rabindranath Tagore. And what is important in the last line is that whenever you read the short story, you always feel the desire to have it more. It just has an open ending. Suddenly it ends up, and you feel like that okay, it must have a bit of taste more. I could have tasted it more. They could have written it some more. So this is the desire you must have when you're reading a short story. I have told you this about when I was teaching you The Lost Child by Mulkraj Anand, that just the abrupt ending, that whether the child got his parents or not, whether the child was finally getting back to his parents or not, or he was all lost. There, at this incomplete ending, Mulkraj Anand ends up the story, just for the readers to interpret out things. So this is the very factor of short stories. Now here, though I have covered it out from the English literature with the other parts, I'll bring into the short story writer. Of course, it's Rabindranath Tagore and his famous short story. See here, Kabliwala, which is there, and of course in Prem Chand. Okay, the famous short stories from Prem Chand. These this man or this author, of course, you know, a great maestro in our Hindi literature, but is similarly and important in the Indian literature as well. We do have the translated short stories of Munshi Premchand because they are quite very morally valued. Of course, the stories have got a very moral value, a lesson, which of course will be all very helpful to everyone who reads it out. Now, how to write short story. So, to recap again, let me tell you, when I talk about the length of the story, we can get novels, we can get novella or long story, short story, biography, and autobiography. And out of all this, for our writing practice, we will have, or we will put our concern in write what short story is, or how can we write the short story in a better way. Okay, in classes we hardly get this time to just go into these all details. We simply give you the idea, the format, and we go into. But this time I thought of doing the video in an elaborate way, just so to enrich your sense in it. Now, the 5 key elements to write a story, the elements which are needed to write a story. Whenever you are writing a story, you must keep in mind the elements here, that what are the things you must focus in. I know always when you are in the exam hall, always you do not keep in mind in all this and you start off writing things. But from my experience, let me tell you, I often find the students, many of the students who, while getting the story or while getting the idea, the first line of the story, they just start off describing those things. But it does not just they are describing an incident. But remember, you are asked to write a story. The story that must have a complete beginning and a middle and an ending. And here, so I have given you the 5 key elements also. Always I agree that in exam halls you don't find this time to write out or to think in this very direction. But if you practice some of them at home in this very way, then gradually you'll have this habit of writing the stories in these ways as well. So, so for story, we have the very important part, which is the theme. Then you have your conflict. Then you have the setting. Then you have the character, and you have the plot. Theme, which is the backbone of your story. You must have a theme to the story that you are writing. It must be having a proper setting, that in which, where, and in what time you are writing this particular story. Of course, the key element, the most important part, you need to have the character. Without characters, you cannot bear out your story. You must have a conflict there. Means conflict, not always a conflict between two friends or an enmity between two friends. No. Here, conflict, when I'm talking about any sort of problem that you might have with the situation, the problem that you might have with the surroundings, the problem where the two people of the story might have among themselves. It can be in very different ways. Okay. And finally, you have the plot on which the whole thing would stand up. It's just remember your plot when you perform on stage. What happened? Just remember that plot is the platform on which you're performing, and theme is the main backbone on which you will be having the story all written up. The plot should be there as a base, and on which the main backbone or the main structure that stands is the theme. And you need to frame the story on the basis of all this. Now let us look into these details. The first thing is theme. It is the frame of your short story that is decorated by plot, setting, conflict, and characters. The main theme, that once you get the title, that this is the story you need to write, or you get outlines that on the basis of this I need to write. So the very first thing you must come out with the theme, that what should be the theme I should deal in with. Okay, so with that, the things the theme is decorated with is the plot, the setting, the conflict, and the characters. Theme is what the story teaches readers, the life lesson, meaning, moral, or message about life or human nature that is communicated by a literary work. It's very important that whatever we are doing, what product is it landing up with? Is it very productive? The time I'm using, okay, I'm doing this work, but what is its outcome? So the theme will be telling out that when you're writing the story, it must convey a message there, or it must have a thing that should all be following, or it can be just an idea that you will bring out from that very story. So theme is very important when you frame up your story. Now the types of theme. The types of theme can be implied themes. Now implied themes must be inferred by considering all the elements of a story and asking what message about life is conveyed. So implied themes. Implied means something that is hidden. That there is not stately or there is not directly stated that this is the theme, but it is all implied. The more you read through the story, the more you think about the message of the story, you find this theme all underlined there. Okay, here the implied theme, that once you get through the story, once you read the story, you understand that yes, this is the theme which is underlined here, which is implied here. Stated themes are directly presented in a story and is easily defined. Stated themes is it's directly stated there that what is the theme you are dealing with, what is the message that the story wants to convey. Okay, now class, when I'm talking about this, it's not only about story writing. Even the very short films or the movies that you see along, of course, movie is a depiction of the stories written, of the script that is written. I'm not talking about drama, but you see the movies or the things which are there. So all these things do have a written document as a story, as a draft, as an outline, and that is what is projected. And when you read it, After seeing the movie, we often come across saying, oh, the plot of the movie is so good, the theme of the story is so good. But then, how do we get to know it? Of course, by observing the movie in detail. Or same way you can do it when you read a story. When you read the story, you are writing, the writer is writing. You are writing the story. And once the reader is reading, the story should be so very effective that the reader must be able to understand the theme that is stated there. If it is stated directly, it's stated theme. If it is all hidden, it's implied theme. Okay. The next is setting. What is setting? Now, the setting tells the reader where and when the story takes place. This is very important, that the setting is important to just to tell the readers that where and when and how and why did this occasion or did this incident take place. For example, we often find some story that tells you about once upon a time. That I'm talking about a story that is there, that took place somewhere at a point of time. So it's once upon a time. Okay. It can always be last day, a story that starts with last day, a story that starts with I was there. And also at times you find a story that completely starts with somebody who's depicting the story directly, but later on you will be able to get to know the time period or the setting. Okay? Setting again is important when I talk about movies. There also, as I told you, in case of storybooks also, any literary piece, any genre of literary piece that depends on the setting, the time, the locale, means the place where the incident took place, or the time when did it happen, and any setting or any time period will of course be effective of some of the important factors of that very time period. Now somebody who is writing a story today, of course the writings that would come up will be effective of the COVID-19 scenario that is happening. There will be writing pieces that will be describing about this incident, about this pandemic situation which we are facing. So this is how a story develops an idea of the current situation, of the scenario which is around. Okay. So here, in case of when I'm talking about setting, one thing about writing of the story, let me tell you that when you write a story, prefer to write it in past tense. You can of course give dialogues. Of course, you can input dialogues there with inverted commas, but try writing the story in a past tense. Now, the third element, or okay, the setting of a story here, see, it's the context in a scene or story that describes the elements in which a story is taking place, including time, place, and environment. As I told you, that when did it happen, where does it take place, and what's the social climate. This is what I have already told you. And purpose, it provides reader with context on the narrative, such as describing and when and where of the setting. That when I'm writing this story sitting here in 2020, I will be giving the readers of 2030 an idea that what has happened in this very year. Or any story which is set at the time period of independence or pre-independence era or post-independence era, the writing itself, they have all depicted the scenario or the setting or the things that were going around at that very point of time. So setting is very important when you are framing out a story. Now, the third and the very important part is the character. Without characters, your story is all very incomplete. You don't get to see stories without the characters, at least when you are writing. The characters are the people, animals, or things that they take part in the action of the story. You have thought of a theme, but you need certain characters in framing out or establishing or implementing that very thing. Okay, and how a story or the theme is projected through the characters. Whatever theme or whatever work the characters need to do is very important, that would give the shape about your story. The fourth important thing is the conflict, as I told you. The primary struggle between the main character or characters and an adverse character, group, or force. Okay, this is conflict, the primary conflict or the struggle that we all know, the enmity, that you're writing about a story where, suppose a problem has been taken place, or here the main character is having a problem with the adverse characters there present in the story, and finally that results come up. Here the conflict is all very clear, but then you have an internal conflict also, a struggle between a character, him and herself. Supposedly, you're writing about a story describing your horrible experience. Okay, one of your horrible experience. So you might say that, ma'am, where I can find the conflict there? Of course, there is a conflict. There is an internal conflict. So whatever happens there, a problem, supposedly you went through an accident, or your parents went through an accident, or something bad had happened to you, so the inner sufferings that you all go through, or the problems that you have faced and how you have fought out of that situation, all these things come under the internal conflict. And then you have the external conflict, a struggle between a character and an outside force, like man versus man, man versus nature, man versus supernatural, man versus society. The external conflict, which is also there. External conflict where the characters among, they fight or they have a problem among themselves. Now let me tell you, fight always do not or fight always does not come up as you are fighting. Okay, it can be in any other way. When you have a difference of opinion, that can be a conflict. When you have the difference of opinion while projecting that very thing, that's also is a conflict. So all these things must take place when it comes for the question of a good quality of story. Why am I giving this detailing of the story, class? Just to make you write a better story. Just think out of the way, not just only reading out from some of the sample books or mugging out of things. No, try to create your own story. Try to develop the ideas with your own story. It might be wrong, you might write with wrong English, that's not a factor. The main thing is that whether you can project out or whether you can write up your mind all very clearly. Okay, with the grammatical things, with the spelling errors, we the teachers are there to make you all correct it. Okay, now the next one. Now, the very important thing, which is the plot. I told you that this is the stage, this is the platform on which the whole story would stand. So, for plot, here is where the actual narration of the story will take place. The main, after the beginning, the main body or the main plot of the story is very important, because here exactly the most important things for the story would take place. The events that occur will be described here. It must have a conflict. It must have a proper beginning, a middle, and end conclusion or conclusion. So I told you that the events that occur here, they must all be described. It must have a conflict, and the plot must have a proper beginning, a middle, and an ending. The middle here will be the part where the whole action would take its force. Now, the plot is a series of events and character actions that relate to the central conflict, the main problem of the story. Every writing piece, they do have a problem. Okay, and there the conflict takes place, and you need to solve that conflict and you need to come up with the result. Okay, so first the introduction where you are describing the things that happen, then the main problems that come, and then you need to solve them, and then you will come with the resolution, or then you will come with the proper conclusion and the end to a story. Now here I'll be telling you an ambiguous thing, that always all the stories do not have a proper ending. It might be proper, you find the ending to be definite, it might not be. I told you in the short stories where it's all open ended, they do not have a proper ending to the story. But when you come across some of the stories, a complete novel, there's a complete outline is there or a complete ending is there. So it depends on you that how you want to end up your story. Now this is how, just understand this diagram very well. If you understand it, If you inculcate this in your mind right from the beginning, it will be helpful for you not only to write better stories in class 9 or 10, but in your future when you want to write some stories. Okay, I don't know, or we don't know that some of you come up to be good writers, come up to be good author. So there, these things one day will be helpful for you. Now the development of a plot. This whole thing is of course the story. Okay, this is the plot in which you must go with the story. Now see, the whole story is being divided into three parts: the beginning, the middle, and the end. First is the exposition. Exposition is when you are exposed to the line of the story, the characters, the setting, and the incident. Okay, and after that, see the rising action that takes place, the line that goes slantingly upwards. Okay, so there you find the conflict. After the introduction, there is a conflict, and from the conflict, you will be changing from the beginning to the middle of the story. You are moving to the main part of the story, and there will be a rising action. Supposedly there is a problem, and the problem is you are facing the problem and it's getting increased and increased. So it's a rising action. And there at the climax, just at the point where you need to do or come up to a solution of solving that very problem. You write a point where you find a solution to the problems that you are facing in the story. So there is the climax. The main action takes its shape in the climactic position right there at the top, or right there at the climax. So that there the extreme point gets up, and from there, climax, whatever happens there, from there a result comes, and again you're coming with the falling action, that everything is soothing down, or the situation is getting changed, the problems are getting solved. So these all comes in the falling action, and finally in the conclusion is the resolution, that you come with the direction, or you come with the opinion that you want to follow, or the result that it comes after all these problems that take place. Okay, so always keep this thing in mind, the plotting, the proper plotting of the story. Now the important tips to write a story. So when I brief up all the things which I told you, so the important tips when you write a story. Okay, 10 tips I've given, and the last tip is very important, that you can break rules if needed. So nothing in English, when you talk about the creative thing, it cannot be all very fixed that these are the rules which I must follow, because it's not a formal piece of writing like a formal letter you are doing. Okay, story writing is your creative piece. It is given just to see how good a writer you are, how good creative your thoughts are, and how good grammatical error free you can all write. So the important tips to write a story. First is fewer characters. Don't incorporate lot more characters, because there you will lose a trace of the important characters which are there. So the more fewer your characters are, the more intense your story will be. Develop characters for theme. It's very important the characters should be developed or should be framed out on the basis of the theme of the story. So you must keep in mind that whatever story or whatever theme I'm giving to my story, it must have the characters as very complementary to it. I've gone through the writings of the students, and there I have found that the students, they start with a good starting to a story, but somewhere while writing they bifurcate from the position, they go to somewhere else, and they'll end up writing something else. So what happens there? There's not a proper plotting. So the development of the characters according to the theme is very important. The next is the single and short time frame. Okay, just one time frame, 1 day, 2 day, some days, not, don't elongate it longer and longer for years. Okay, just the time frame should be all very short when you're writing about the short stories. Vivid surroundings, the surroundings or the scenario or the situation which you're writing about the story or in the story, it should have a vivid detailing of it. The vivid surroundings, the intricate details should be there, that would give the story a better angle. Your catchy first line. This is very important. Though we say that we must not judge a book by the cover, but still we do take books by looking into the cover only. From a pile of books that is exhibited there in some racks or in bookstalls, the things which we all know, that's okay. The books which we all know, that is okay. I'm not getting into all this. But then, when we see the pictures imprinted on the first cover page or the author there, we of course select books on that very basis. So, as the catchy covers are important, we also need to frame out catchy first line. Your beginning should be so very catchy that the readers must not move their interest in something else. They must read the story in a way or that they cannot take their attention away by not reading the story which you are writing. Okay, so the lines, first lines should all be catchy. Choose suitable point of view. This is important that the point of view must be all appropriate. It should be all suitable. It must have a proper line through which it should all move. One conflict only, one problem. Don't come up arousing with many problems when you're writing about short story. When you write novels, that is something different. But for the short stories, there should be one problem, one endangering problem, or any sort of conflict, not many. Proper development of the plot. The story must go with the proper plot. Try, even in a short story, try to incorporate more of the beginning lines, or try to incorporate the conflict and the climax and the rising action and the falling action. Try to frame it in this way. You know what happened? The story looks very good, or the story is quite readable, understandable, and it's all very crisp and compact if you follow this plotting. The theme in focus. While writing the story, you must not bifurcate from the theme. You must remember what was the theme while starting the story, and the theme must not be bifurcated. You must not start with something else and land up writing the other. Break rules if needed. This is the last rule out of all things. Even in stories, you feel like that I need to break these rules to frame up the best story which I can. Of course, you're welcome to do that. I'm not minding you within these tips or within these rules. So I have written here, say, important tips to write a story, not the fixed rules that you must follow. These are your guidelines that would prove you to write a better story following them. But still you feel like that I can write better stories, breaking up some of the rules. Of course, you can do that. Okay, so once you are writing the story, it's important that you go through these very tips and write a better story. Now, these are the examples of the story writing that comes for your exam. Okay. Now, for story writing, you get it in two ways. First is that you will be getting some outlines and you need to frame a story on the given outlines or on the basis of the outlines. This you have learned in your previous classes as well. There's another kind where you only get the beginning lines and you need to frame the story after that. The beginning lines are given and you cannot change those beginning lines in your story. You need to keep those lines and then you need to start the story from where they all ask you to. So here the example, type 1. See, write a short story in 200 to 250 words with the help of the clues given below. Give a suitable title. So this is first kind of this example. That going to Mumbai by train to attend the marriage of your cousin, you got stuck in a traffic jam, you reached the railway station late, boarded a wrong train and realized after 2 hours. Now you, so the outlines they have all given you and you need to frame the story on the basis of these given outlines. Okay. Now, the next kind comes, see, write a short story in about 200 to 250 words with the given beginning lines and you must have a suitable title. The previous one was the story where the outlines are being provided and here they have given you the beginning lines. You need to write the story after that. Sachin was standing at the balcony watching the last rays of the sun. Loud and angry voices in the street below distracted his attention. He ran down the stairs to see what had happened. Okay, these are the beginning lines. So when you write this type of story, you will write the title first and then these beginning lines. The beginning lines must not change. And from what had happened after this, your story starts. Your writing yourself of the story would start after this. Okay, class. So these are the two kinds of stories that do come for your exams. Any one type will be coming. Now here I have given a solved example of the first kind of story. That is, the outlines are provided and I have framed the story on the basis of that. So the title of the story or of my story is A Series of Unfortunate Events. So I told you, remember the plotting which I have told you, that first the introduction to the thing, the beginning, and then there will be a conflict, the problem, and there will be the rising action, that is the problem getting higher and higher, and the climactic position, the extreme problem taking place, and there a solution should come, and then the rising down or the coming down of the problem, and there the final resolution. So see, I sat down with relief as I ticked off the last task in the checklist. I wanted everything to be perfect, and it was my closest cousin's marriage in Mumbai. The alarm rang next morning. I woke up in excitement and booked a cab to the railway station. Everything was going perfectly until I got stuck in a traffic jam. See, here the conflict started. The conflict with me and the surrounding. Okay, the external conflict here. I reached the railway station late, but on the side of the train still waiting on the platform, I hurried and somehow managed to get into the train. I breathed a sigh of relief and got comfortable. It was only when the ticket collector came I realized that I had been in the wrong train for 2 hours. Conflict and the rising action. Problems getting intense. I panicked and deboarded the train at the next station. I tried booking a ticket for the next train to Mumbai, but there was no availability. On coming back from the ticket counter, I realized that my luggage was missing. Even after hours of finding and reporting it, there was no trace of it. I got tired and lost hope. Tried booking a cab. With the minimal amount I was left within my pocket. The cab couldn't reach on time as it was raining heavily. Disheartened, I finally walked my way to the nearest hotel, contacted my parents, and recited them the series of unfortunate events that happened during the day. Alas, I couldn't even make it to my closest cousin's wedding. So the result or the conclusion is that the resolution that I could not attend the marriage ceremony. So many problems took place one after the other, and it was the rising action. And the extreme climax when my luggage was also stolen and the cab was booked, but the cab did not come on time. And finally, the falling down action is where I came down to a hotel and called my parents and informed them, and the final resolution which is there is I missed out the marriage party. See, this is just a short story, but I have tried to keep out the plotting very clearly for you to understand. So try to frame out the stories in this very way. Okay, class. So this was quite a long video for you, but I'll hope that this video is very helpful for you and it proves to be quite beneficial for you, and you start writing stories keeping these points which I have described here. Okay, so I'll be ending up the lesson today. So keep a watch in the school website and the YouTube channel, and keep yourself updated with all the notifications which are being uploaded in the school website, and complete the works which are given in the worksheets so that we can all check it out once the school reopens and you don't lag behind. You all are commenting or giving me comments and asking me questions when you are stuck up somewhere. Please continue doing that. Okay, so I'll be coming up with my next video soon, and till then, goodbye, thank you, and have a nice day.